Hi, is it possible that you're addicted to anxiety? Because anxiety shares some commonalities with addiction, although of course anxiety is much easier to recover from than addiction. But here's the point, if you're addicted to anxiety, or if you're doing some of the things that make addictions addictive behind the scenes unconsciously, then it's going to make it much harder to recover from anxiety than it would normally be. And so I think it's really worth exploring how anxiety can look a bit like addiction. So that's what we're talking about today. To start with, let's think about the biology of anxiety. In the first instance, your brain perceives a threat and it causes the release of adrenaline and cortisol and other hormones into your bloodstream, which give you that experience of the fight, flight or freeze process, and you're familiar with that. That then prepares you to respond to the threat in whatever is the most appropriate way. But if your brain perceives a threat which is internally generated and generated by your brain, as opposed to externally generated, an actual threat, then the fight or flight response is a massive, extreme mistake. It's fundamentally a mistake, because imagining something frightening should not generate the fight or flight response, because that is designed to help you to genuinely respond to external reality threats. So if you follow my videos, if you follow my approach, then you'll realize that I always say anxiety is a mistake. Now let's explore how the addictive element can come into anxiety. We've established that your brain perceives a threat, it gives you the fight or flight system. Fine, okay. But if you accept that anxiety is sort of natural and normal, and to go even further, if you think that your anxiety somehow protects you or gives you a feeling of control, that's when we step into the addictive element. You see, your brain tries very hard to be calibrated to, in a sense, what's going on, because it has to enable you to navigate external reality. But your internal reality can create alternative ways of thinking about things. I mean, in essence, that's creativity, it's imagination, it's all of the things that really make life very interesting. And your brain has a hard job telling the difference between a creative imagination and an actuality. When you accept the confusion of realities, you're stepping into the addictive aspect of addiction. And then, of course, you start organizing your life around anxiety, which strengthens the addictive element. You start avoiding things, you seek distractions, you ruminate on anxiety, and you express the validity of the anxiety. You're expressive about the things that you fear. Granted, all of this goes on behind the scenes and you're not necessarily aware of it, but you have to become aware of it if you want to get anxiety out of your life. That would be true of addiction too. You have to become aware so that you can implement the necessary strategies at the right time. So let's think about how to reduce this addictive quality of anxiety and actually then start to progressively move anxiety out of your life. So we've established that you imagine a threat, you get the fight or flight thing kick in, and then the bit that's addictive is that you accept the anxiety as a normality, as a reality, as something that gives you control. Accepting the validity of the anxiety and then organizing your life around it is the addictive factor. So what we want to do is we want to challenge this process. You can't stop your brain from imagining threats because you've been practicing doing it for quite a long time, and that's just the nature of the creative brain, right? I can imagine a tiger, but I recognize it as an imagination. I can imagine a car crash or a plane crash, but I recognize it as imagination. It's when the fight or flight system kicks in that we've got to start challenging and questioning the validity of this response. And so I think we ask three important questions. The first one is this: is this feeling of threat realistic given where I am now? Bear in mind that anxiety tends to be future focused. So if the threat's in the future, why do you need to feel anxious now, right? Given where I am, do I need to feel this level of threat now? That's number one. Number two, what would another person think in this situation? So we're kind of bringing in a bit of an external context. And the third question is, do I need to feel anxious now? Do I need to feel anxious now? And as soon as you start to feel that feeling of anxiety, you ask yourself these questions. I've memorized the questions because in essence, these questions are challenging the validity of the anxiety process. They kind of go into your brain, hang on a minute, brain, isn't this a bit over the top? Hang on a minute, brain, is this realistic? Hold on a minute, brain, do I need to feel anxious now? You have to retrain your brain to give you the opposite of anxiety, because you have been training your brain. You may not know this, but you have been training your brain to give you anxiety. And therefore you need to challenge this process and train it to stop giving you anxiety. Otherwise, why would it stop? So, introduce the 3 questions. And finally, you have been on this journey of anxiety for a while. Therefore, you have to accept that you're going to feel anxious for a bit. You have to accept that the feeling of anxiety, it's, let's call it the vestiges of the addictive process. You're going to feel it for a while, but we do not give it meaning. We do not accept its validity. It's just a pang of addiction left over, but you're determined not to use. It's a pang of anxiety left over, but you're determined not to reinforce it. That is definitely the path out of anxiety. If you do that, then there's absolutely no reason why you have to continue to be anxious. Whenever I talk to people who have prolonged anxiety, they're always justifying the reason why they need to be anxious. If you justify and accept and make your anxiety response like a valid, yeah, I've got to be anxious so I feel in control, then it won't ever change. But if you say, you know what, it's a mistake and I don't want it anymore, then you're definitely going to get some progress. Thanks for taking the time to watch and listen. Please like and subscribe, and if you have any comments or questions, just leave them below and I'm always sure to answer any comment or question. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.